The dining room looked unusually beautiful that night. Soft golden light from the chandelier reflected off the polished table, making the crystal glasses sparkle. My mother had even placed white lilies in the center, my favorite flowers. A chocolate cake sat beside them with silver candles shaped like the number 25. For a moment, I thought this birthday was going to be different. My parents were not affectionate people. Growing up, our house had always been quiet, almost cold. Birthdays were usually simple, maybe a cake, maybe a quick happy birthday, and then everyone went back to their routines. But tonight felt special. "Happy birthday, Daniel," my father said, raising his glass of wine. My mother gave a small clap and smiled politely. 25 already, I can't believe it. I smiled back, though something about the atmosphere felt strange. It was too formal, too rehearsed, like actors performing a scene. Still, I tried to enjoy the moment. After all, I had worked hard to reach this point in my life. I had just received a promotion at work, and for the first time I felt like I was finally building something meaningful. A career, a future. Maybe my parents were proud of me. Dinner began quietly. We talked about ordinary things. My job, the weather, my apartment across town. My mother asked a few questions, though she seemed more interested in cutting her food into tiny pieces than actually listening to my answers. My father poured himself another glass of wine and leaned back in his chair. Then he laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. It sounded sharp, almost mocking. "You know," he said, glancing at my mother. "We should probably tell him." My stomach tightened. "Tell me what?" I asked. My mother sighed deeply, like someone who had been carrying a heavy secret for years. "Well, Daniel," she began slowly, folding her napkin neatly beside her plate, "now that you're 25, we think you're old enough to hear the truth." My heart started beating faster. "What truth?" My father smirked and took a sip of his wine. "We only kept you for the tax benefits." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. The words didn't make sense. "What?" I whispered. My mother shrugged as if she had just commented on the weather. "You were an accident," she said calmly. "We never planned to have a child." The room suddenly felt smaller. My father continued speaking like this was an ordinary conversation. "But once you were born, the tax deductions were pretty helpful," he said. "Kids are expensive, but the refunds made it manageable." My hands slowly tightened around my fork. "Wait," I said, forcing a weak laugh. "You're joking, right?" Neither of them laughed. Instead, my mother blew out one of the crooked candles on the cake. "No," she replied quietly, "we're serious." And in that moment, every strange memory from my childhood suddenly made sense. That night, I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought the weight of their words would break something inside me the moment I left the house. But instead, I felt strangely empty. The drive back to my apartment was quiet. The streets were nearly deserted, and the orange glow of the streetlights stretched across the pavement like long shadows. My hands gripped the steering wheel while their words replayed in my mind again and again. "We only kept you for the tax benefits." I tried to laugh it off at first. Maybe it was a cruel joke. Maybe they had too much wine. But deep down, I knew the truth. They meant every word. The more I thought about it, the more pieces of my childhood began falling into place. The forgotten birthdays. The way my school events were always too busy for them to attend. The short conversations at the dinner table that felt more like business meetings than family time. I had always believed they were just distant people. Now I understood. I was never their son. I was simply an obligation. When I finally reached my apartment building, I sat in the car for a few minutes, staring at the dark windows above me. The silence gave my mind too much room to wander. But then another thought slowly pushed through the pain. My parents didn't know anything about my life. They never asked about my job beyond a casual housework. They didn't know what projects I was involved in. They didn't know what position I held at the company. And they definitely didn't know what had happened just 3 weeks ago. I walked into my apartment, tossed my keys onto the counter, and opened my laptop. The email was still sitting in my inbox. The subject line read, "Acquisition Agreement Final Confirmation." My company, a small tech startup I had joined right after college, had just been bought by a larger corporation. The deal had taken months to finalize, and most of it had been kept confidential. But what my parents never knew was that 2 years ago, I had been offered something rare. Equity, a small percentage of ownership in the company. At the time, it hadn't seemed like much, just a few shares in a struggling startup trying to survive in a competitive industry. Now those shares had turned into something else entirely. I clicked open the final payment statement. The number still didn't feel real. After taxes and legal fees, my portion of the deal came to just over $4 million. $4 million. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. For years I had imagined the day I would tell my parents that I had succeeded. I pictured them finally looking at me with pride. Now that moment meant nothing, because the truth was simple. The son they treated like a tax deduction had quietly become a millionaire, and they had absolutely no idea. 6 months passed after that birthday dinner. In those months, my life changed faster than I ever imagined. The company acquisition was finalized, the money was transferred, and suddenly, the small apartment I once lived in felt like a temporary memory. I moved into a modern penthouse overlooking the city skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows, quiet mornings with coffee, and a view that stretched for miles. For the first time in my life, I felt something I had never truly experienced before. Freedom, no awkward family dinners, no forced phone calls, no pretending everything was normal. I stopped thinking about my parents completely. They had made their feelings clear that night, and I had accepted it. Some people spend years trying to earn love from those who will never give it. I decided I wasn't going to be one of those people. My focus shifted to work and investments. I began meeting entrepreneurs, helping new startups grow, and learning how to manage the money I had earned. Life was calm until one ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in my office reviewing documents when my assistant knocked on the door. "Daniel," she said carefully. I looked up from my laptop. "Yes, there are 2 people downstairs asking to see you." I sighed lightly. "Do they have an appointment?" She hesitated. "No, but they said it's very important." I leaned back in my chair. "Who are they?" She glanced at the tablet in her hands, clearly unsure how to say it. "They claim they're your parents." For a moment, the room felt completely silent. 6 months, 6 entire months without a single message, phone call, or email from them, and now they were here. I let out a quiet laugh. "Of course, send them up," I said calmly. A few minutes later, the office door slowly opened. My parents stepped inside. They looked different, older somehow, tired. The confident expressions they used to carry were gone, replaced with nervous glances around the room. My father stared at the massive windows behind my desk while my mother clutched her purse tightly. This is your office?" my mother asked softly. I nodded once. My father cleared his throat. "We didn't realize you were doing so well." Of course they didn't, because they had never cared enough to know. My mother quickly walked a few steps closer, forcing a warm smile that felt completely unfamiliar. "Daniel, sweetheart, it's been so long." The word sweetheart sounded strange coming from her. I folded my hands on the desk and looked directly at them. "What do you want?" I asked calmly. They exchanged a quick, nervous glance. Finally, my father sighed. "Our situation has changed," he admitted quietly. My mother spoke next, her voice trembling slightly. "We're having some financial problems." There it was, the real reason they had come. Not love, not regret. "Money," my father swallowed and looked at me again. "We were hoping," he said carefully, "that you might be able to help us." The room fell completely silent after my father finished speaking. "We were hoping you could help us." For a moment, none of us moved. The only sound in the office was the faint hum of the air conditioner and the distant noise of traffic far below the building. I leaned back in my chair and studied their faces carefully. 6 months ago, they had sat across from me at a birthday dinner table and calmly told me that my entire existence had been nothing more than a financial advantage. Now they stood in front of me looking nervous, almost desperate. Life had a strange sense of balance. "What kind of financial problems?" I asked calmly. My father rubbed his hands together, clearly uncomfortable. "The house the mortgage is behind," he admitted, "and your mother's medical bills have been piling up. Things just got out of control." My mother nodded quickly. We try to handle it ourselves, but it's too much. I watched them quietly. The same two people who once treated me like a burden were now asking for my help. The irony almost made me smile, and you thought of me. I said slowly. My mother stepped closer to the desk. Of course we did. You're our son. The words felt hollow. For years I had wanted to hear them say that with pride. Now it sounded like nothing more than a strategy. I stood up from my chair and walked toward the large window behind me. The city stretched endlessly below. Thousands of lives moving forward, unaware of the strange moment happening in my office. Behind me, my parents waited anxiously. After a few seconds, I turned around. You said something interesting on my 25th birthday. I said. Both of them froze. My father looked confused. What do you mean? I walked back to my desk and opened a drawer. Inside was a small folder I had prepared earlier that morning. I placed it gently on the desk and slid it toward them. Do you remember what you told me that night? I asked. My mother's face slowly turned pale. Neither of them answered. So I reminded them. You said you only kept me for the tax benefits. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. My father shifted uncomfortably. Daniel, we didn't mean it like that. But I continued as if he hadn't spoken. I actually spent some time thinking about that. I said calmly. I opened the folder and pulled out a single piece of paper. A check. I slid it across the desk for $25,000. They both stared at it in confusion. What is this? My father asked. I folded my arms and gave them a small, polite smile. That, I said quietly, is my repayment. My mother blinked. Repayment, yes. I tapped the check gently with my finger. I calculated roughly how much you probably saved in tax benefits over the 25 years you kept me. The silence that followed was almost painful. That check should cover it. My father looked stunned. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Daniel, please, she whispered. But I simply walked to the office door and opened it. You've been paid, I said calmly, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely free.